Okay, so I've been writing this Universal State Constitution for a bit over 3 months now. I mean, I first wrote the first draft in early November, and now it's mid-February. Um, and so there's been quite a few modifications, and I actually made a big 4-hour video like about a month ago showing the modifications at that point. And unfortunately, it got deleted because somebody wanted to take a break and showed me a music thing that was copyrighted, and that just wrecked the whole thing. Just got it got muted, and then I couldn't download it, and so it just got destroyed, unfortunately. But it doesn't matter because I still have the document itself, and when I get a website, I could just post the different documents, and people will just be able to see the changes for themselves. So I'm just doing this more to kind of. Sorry, I feel like this is I pretty much finalized the Constitution at this point. So kind of to mark the fact that it's kind of done, I just want to make a quick video. And instead of just going sh like covering like in detail every change that I made, which is why it took 4 hours last time, I'm just gonna go over the sort of bit major changes and just briefly explain to it. And I'm not going to show it, right? So that's why I'm not even showing, partly because Streamlabs has sort of messing up and not able to show two different text documents at the same time. Um, so so basically, what we're gonna do is just compare the differences, and okay, so section one was the fundamental ethical principles. So I've still kept the fundamental ethical principles. I've actually covered how I've changed my fundamental ethics in the previous video on where I said the Gorth is probably good. And so I'm not going to go over that again because that took quite some time and it just would be redundant. Um, but I sort of explained why I did the changes that I did. So that's basically the change that you see there. And I actually got rid of the Gorth in the fundamental principles part, and instead I put it down in section 4, which is section rules on other matters, because I was already present there, and so it seemed kind of redundant. And fundamentally, like getting rid of the Gorth is not really a fundamental ethical principle, really. So I mean, you could say that it is, but in another, I mean, but I think it makes more sense to consider that the Gorth is something that violates the fundamental principles, and that's why we have to get rid of it. And so in the end, it talks a bit less about Gorth. So there's no more Gorth in section one. Instead, there's a new second article, and which is basically like the first article is enjoyism, saying that we should maximize enjoyment, minimize suffering for everyone. And uh, now, yeah, I'm just looking to see if yeah, and I mentioned that there's a second ethical principle, which is what you could say is like what I call satisfying the preferences of sane Anders, which involves having Anders in their environment be the way they originally have been. So basically, it's what I already said in the previous video, is that there's like uh, to me, I don't like the idea of just being happy if it's in a sort of a simulation world. Um, so basically, I want to be happy. I mean, I want to experience enjoyment, but enjoyment as me or as a person similar to me. And then in the second one, I explained that there's like various principles that derive from that, from like, so there's several values that should be respected by the government, that should be promoted by the government, um, like including things like like freedom and fairness, and those basically stem from wanting to create enjoyment for Anders, that's also a new term that's what I used to call manoids. I'm calling Anders, um, and so that means humans or equivalent, sapient species. Um, so so that's that. Section two. So section two is rules of governments. So that has changed quite a bit, um, because before I initially envisioned a fully unitary state with no, like, not even any local government, And I realized that in practice that just wouldn't be very feasible. It wouldn't be practical. And so instead, I've decided to I've decided. I mean, I realized that one had to allow for there being local government, A, and B, on top of that, you can actually have like local um, like supreme government. So basically, it would become just like essentially a federation instead of instead of really just one state. Like you wouldn't even have any one central government potentially, and that is if like the places that are settled, the different planets that are settled are so far apart that it wouldn't be practical to have a single central government. So I allow for so what I've done now is that basically it can either be a unitary state, and it's a unitary state if there is close communication, like if it's quick to travel or to communicate between all the parts that are settled by the universal state. And if that's not the case, then it becomes a federal state. And there's no central government. And then basically, like if there has to be some sort of ruling between two different states, well, then it's other states, that aren't involved that will um, combined issue a judgment on like an arbitrage regarding like disputes between two states. So that's the way that would be done. But otherwise, it's still the same. There's no bears. There's still no barriers to mobility of persons. So even if there's no like central government, there's still everybody's free to move where they want. Um, so then what I've done is that I've added. So there's still like in the way it functions. There's still like popular votation, and so that's the direct democracy component. And there's representatives. So you know that's the representatives chosen by sortition, which is the representative democracy component. So that I'm keeping. And so it's they like representatives have to be by sortition, and they're not elected. Um, and so and so they have to be in chambers as well. So that stayed the same. The difference is that now I'm allowing for local governments as well, down to like very local, like just as much as there is now. But what I'm saying is that still the higher up government has the power to completely override anything that gets done by a local government. Um, so that's the main change with the Section 2 rules of governments. Um, and like there's yeah, not much more to say than that. Section 3 rules of economics. So what have I changed there? Well, yeah, because now again, because there's not necessarily a unitary state. So before I said there's a single fiat currency, and now I'm saying there are fiat currencies, right? So there can be different ones. And so now I also have to allow for things like exchange. So I said that there can be an exchange rate, which is floating. Um, so that's the main change there for the currency, monetary policy. Then for Article 2 of Rules of Economics, I've just sort of fleshed it out. I haven't really fundamentally changed it. I've just fleshed it out of what the government does and what the government does not do. Um, what what I have specified is that the government can also just take care of anything if the government does it better, which I haven't really said before. Then there, like regarding taxation, I've also fleshed it out a bit, but it hasn't really fundamentally changed. Oh yeah, except that corporations now are not taxed, whereas before I had this progressive tax on corporations and progressive based on their size, and now I'm just getting rid of all corporate tax. And the reason for this is that, well, before I was thinking, well, big corporations can undercut smaller ones, so we have to put the smaller ones on an even playing field by taxing the bigger ones more. But then I realized, well, actually, this is providing a service to people. It's making stuff cheaper to people. Um, and so they're actually doing stuff better to a large extent, and that's why they're cheaper. Um, and so, which is why in the end I felt it. And also the other problem is that like it doesn't necessarily like depending on the size of your sector, just having a blanket similar tax on all corporations of any size, it doesn't really seem like probably it just seems a bit too difficult to do. Um, but there is a tax on negative externalities and rent seeking. So if a corporation is, for instance, if it appears that big corporations are are able to be cheaper, not just because they're more efficient, but because they're actually just rent seeking, then yes, then they're actually potentially can be taxed. But that's why basically I don't have any specific tax on negative externalities and rent seeking. I say whenever sensible, the government also imposes taxes, and I put taxes in now in like quotation marks because actually they're fees really. Because to me, like a negative externality really it's something that it's a damage they're causing to the economy, so it's actually a fee. It's not a taxation. Um, it's like you're paying for your ability to do this. Um, Instead of a taxation, which is more like just how money being taken away, sort of irrespectively of what you're getting back in return. Like a fee is when you get something and you have to pay for it, right? Whereas taxing is you just have to pay for stuff without necessarily getting anything back. So this is taxation on rent-seeking, taxation on negative externalities is basically what you get back in exchange for the taxation, which is actually a fee. What you get back is this privileged status of being able to um, create negative externalities or benefit from rent-seeking. Um, so, and then I said that I've added, of course, that like when the production is in the hand of government when machines, the source of government revenue shall be the money paid by persons to such machines in exchange for products. So basically, just making that clear that that is how it works, which was already implied, but it wasn't very clear. Then basic income basically stayed the same, but I've added the fact um that you can also have like not just basic income, but basic like bigger amounts that are periodically given. Like instead of just a monthly amount, so like every 10 years, for instance, you can give a much bigger amount. Um, and then five. So I fleshed that out for the income cap. Um, I've changed it. Before it was a centennial personal income cap, and now it's between 30 and 60 years, right? So you're allowed to change somehow, also to allow for the fact that different planets will have different years length. Um, and so I'm looking if there's anything else. I mean, there is. Oh yes, I've changed the facts. So before it was the amount. I said the amount is fixed to double the sum of per capita total paid by user economic product. But then I realized that, so in any case, so first what I changed is that it shouldn't be based on the paid by user economic product, but by expenditure. Because people actually use money, like I had this idea that the total paid by user economic product, which means the amount of stuff that gets created that isn't provided for free by the government, um, I thought that amounted to what people actually would be using their personal income to spend on, but actually no, because some of the income gets spent on stuff that isn't part of the economic product, right? They'll spend things, for instance, on investment. They'll spend things on, for instance, on housing that's already built and is not included in the economic product, right? So actually, what the logical thing to base it on was the personal expenditure. And so then I changed it to personal expenditure, but then I realized that actually I just wanted, because the basic income I simply said make it as high as possible without hurting the economy. But what I actually really in the end wanted was a fixed ratio, just so that to ensure that there really would be always the same ratio between the maximum income and the minimum income. And because I think that I want to really just have a strong limit on the amount of inequality. And so, see, the problem is that if you just say that basic income has to be as high as possible, then you'll have the rich people that'll say, well, we have to lower the basic income, and that wouldn't affect them in any way. whereas now it does, because if you lower the basic income, then you also lower the maximum income. So what I've done is that now I've said the cap is fixed to 12 times the basic income. Um, so that is that, and then predicting the income cap. So before, um, I just said that you predicted in advance, and then you revised the income cap accordingly. And now I'm realizing that, well, for instance, there could be losses. If the income cap was predicted too low, then people will have paid more in taxes, and then they would have just less money than they would have had the prediction actually been correct. And it wouldn't necessarily be possible to properly compensate because we don't know how much they would have earned. Um, so instead, what I'm saying is that you look at the probable range of, future what the income cap actually should be based on what the basic income is. And so, what you're doing is like basically at the beginning of a person's period, there'll be a very wide range for the end of the period, and then as you progress towards the end of the period, then it gets narrowed down more and more as there's less uncertainty, as there's less and less time ahead of you, and so then people progress. So what you say is that you allow people to keep a lot more money than probably they will be able to keep in the end, but to allow because potentially the economy might grow more than we're expecting on the average scenario. And if that is the case, well, if they paid according to the average scenario of economic growth, then they'll have paid too much if the economy ends up growing more. So instead, what we're doing is that we're basically only making them pay as much as they would have to pay according to like the maximum growth that of within the sort of vaguely expected scenarios of economic growth. So you could say like the 95th expected percentile, or something of economic growth. Or like in this case, well, the 97.5 usually would, so that basically the range of expected is 95. So I know this is not very clear. At some point, if I get a website, I'll try to explain it better. Um, but that is kind of the best I can do at this point. Um, and now I'm just saying that each planet can have its own period of income cap. So that's the other thing actually that I didn't mention for governments is that but yeah, I mean it was sort of implied, but that uh, each basically if the universal state is federal, if there's no central government, then obviously there are going to be different laws, but they all have the Constitution. They all have the Constitution of the U.S. So the laws have to be within the limits of the Constitution, but there's otherwise there's just different laws between the different planets, or different. That's the other thing is that basically, um, it's per unit, so it's either like each independent unit is either going to be a planet um, or uh, or a star system or a galaxy. And so what you're gonna so and it's basically based on whether like how much how much time it takes for information to go from one planet to the other, or how much time it takes for people to go from one place to the other, rather. So again, because like we want to unify as much as possible. So if it's easy to travel between planets or to communicate between planets, then we'll have them be part of this. We'll have them all have a central government. If it's easy to travel, for instance, between two habitable planets and inhabited planets in the same star system, if that is the case, then all star systems have to have a central government. And for instance, if it's easy to travel between all star systems within a galaxy, then all galaxies have to have a central government. But there's no universal central government. See, that's how it works. Um, and the actual limit that I did is 1 second. Uh, so 1 second of communication one way, so 2 seconds back and forth of delay of communication, or 1 day of travel one way. So one Earth, like 24 hours. And then six. So that's on corporations. So what I'm saying is that before I said people can have only one corporation at a time. Now I'm saying that the total corporate assets that or annual revenue that a person. So like before I said people can only have one corporation, and then corporations that are above that have assets or annual revenue greater than the personal income cap have to become public. Now I'm saying that instead that you can have as many corporations that you want, but the total amount of corporate assets or annual revenue that the person owns may not be greater than the personal income cap. Like then some of it has to go public or just has to be like liquidated or something. And again, that's to avoid people accumulating too much power by being able to make corporate decisions. Um, then yeah, I had this fact that corporations were taxed, so now I'm not saying that they're taxed, but they can be taxed if it's considered that if bigger corporations are actually just benefiting from uh like rent seeking or negative externalities or something. Um, like then I just made it clear that owners of corporations cannot make expenditures through their corporations, personal expenditures, I mean. Um, and including I actually specified this includes items shown off in lucrative self-promotional ventures and item made, which would imply, for instance, like people being sort of like quote these quote influencer people, like people just showing off their wealth and stuff. So if you like buy a Ferrari just to like show off having a Ferrari and then like you make money off of that, because you're like showing Instagram pictures and like you get money from that. Like that does not count. Okay, that does not count as a corporate expenditure. That is still a personal expenditure. Um, and also items majorly used personally and only minorly for business persons. So again, if you use a Ferrari, but like maybe you rent it out once a year to someone, well, it's still mostly for personal use then, so you can't do that either. So and then I said before I had that people were not liable for the debt of corporation, but now I'm saying that they can choose to be liable, because then if they can choose to be liable, then they might be given, for instance, bigger loan or something, so we can say that they may choose to be liable. And so then I have again the same thing where the corporations are divided into shares, and I slightly changed just how the exact sort of rules for the how votations happen. Oh yeah, so that's one of the things that also happened in governments is for the governance part for like votations is that before I had like specific numbers, um, like people would have to stay for 4 years, and there was a specific number of people in each chamber, and now there's a big range, right? So there's a range of different amounts of people that a chamber of representatives can hold, and there's a range of different times that the representatives can serve for. Um, and there's a range of different times like that's allowed for that one can choose to, um, say is the limit for acquiring signatures. There's a range of how many signatures have to be acquired. This is for like popular initiatives. Um, so yeah, now I provided ranges instead of just fixed numbers, because it's true that just a fixed number doesn't really, that is so arbitrary. So to get rid of the arbitrariness, I changed it from one single number to a range of numbers. And so same there for votations and corporations, right? Is that shareholders now there's a range of numbers, and so now I just said that the rules are the same as for governance. Um, And I've also said that there may be restrictions, partial or total restrictions on personal ownership of corporations and shares once production is in the hands of government run machines. Right? Once machines can do better than the government, than humans, then it can be just the machines that do production. Let's see. Section 4, rules on other matters. Um, so before I said that a human is considered a person whenever a functional nervous system arises in an embryo or a fetus. And now I say an ander, so any human sort of equivalent, is considered a person at birth, right? Because back then I was sort of on the idea of killing off all other species, and actually now so that's another thing I forgot to mention. Yeah, I no longer believe in killing off all other ander species because I um well, because A, people are not really gonna like that, and B, because some planets might have like different environments that wouldn't be like suitable for humans, and so it makes sense to allow for different species to exist so that different environments can be occupied. Well, I still have said, and I say that afterwards, that there has to be as much unification as possible between species. Um, so I changed a bit abortion, but not all that much. Basically, basically, no, I actually haven't changed it. Abortion is the same. I think I changed it sort of between, but then I changed it back. So now I'm saying that basically abortion, uh, below. So even though they're not persons, we still care about fetuses, and so we're basically not allowing abortion past the age of acquisition of a functional brain, and except if the mother's health is at risk. Um, and so what I'm saying is that then even it can be potentially even uh, more limited uh, if like artificial gestation is possible. So before I said the age of legal adulthood, I said 14 years. Again, just one number is a bit arbitrary, so instead I changed it to between 13 and 16 years. Um, and then I just fleshed out a bit to explain who, and that was already a long time ago, who is like a major and who is a minor. So I'm explaining that majors are adults of sound mind and minors are the others. Um, and then just a few rules. So then there's just a few rules on like uh, crime and punishment and stuff. So they're just basic rules that we just have in most places. So I'm not really gonna go over that too much. There's still like no death penalty and stuff. Um, and the rest of I just added a few things, but it's not really very interesting. It's stuff that pretty much anyone would agree on. Um, yeah, so I'm just looking. Yeah, so then I had the so-called, so that has changed a lot. Before I had but except I moved it a bit further. But basically, before I had freedom of speech, and now, well, firstly, I've added the fact that we ban the kind of speech that is already banned now. So, divulging like sensitive information and stuff. And also now what I'm saying is that basically I said the expression of wrong beliefs in any form and even implicitly as per the annex on the matter, because I wrote an annex on the matter, is forbidden. So basically there's from like basically freedom of speech, there's really not freedom of speech. And I realized the reason for that is because we're seeing what happens when you get freedom of speech is that people just get sucked into these crazy beliefs, and that's why we have all these just this terrible people believing in just completely crazy stuff. It's just because they hear other people say crazy stuff. So we can't let them do that. So basically, um, I'm just gonna maybe change it. I wrote the expression of wrong beliefs. I'm gonna change it to maybe to the expression of wrong, um, ideologically beliefs, I guess. Except I wrote as per the annex, yeah, so it doesn't. Um, but basically, I've become very much anti-freedom of speech when it comes to ideology. So obviously, you're allowed to say stupid shit if it's just like regarding your personal life. So you're allowed to say just like lie. You're allowed to lie and say that you went somewhere when you didn't. I mean, it's legal. Um, you're not allowed to like say that you believe in some sort of stupid ideological nonsense like believing in borders or believing uh you know or not supporting basic income and income cap or not supporting universal state. You're not allowed to say that you support religion. You're not allowed to like all that kind of silly stuff that you just cannot say it. And again, it's not sort of out of snowflakery. It's not the way that quote conservatives or leftists, many modern leftists will act, whereby like it's the saying it itself that's considered morally wrong. No, it's not. Like no, it's and that's somehow unacceptable. No, just saying it per se is not really that big of a deal. Like the problem is that you're thinking it, but we can't know what you're thinking. So the problem is that if you say it, then other people are going to be susceptible to believing it too, and that's what we want to prevent. Right. So it's because of that. And meanwhile, yeah, the gun policy is the same, but what I've said now is that the government basically cannot be able to uh, basically oppress the civilian population. So the civilian population, if there was a war between like the government forces and the civilian population would have to win. And so I'm saying that civilians can own weapons, but still limited to non-automatic firearms or anything as lethal, but not anything more lethal. Um, let's see. Then there was oh yeah, the activities that are pleasurable but potentially harmful. Well, those things like drugs and etc., but also things like sports. So I'm still before I actually at one point I considered I actually banned them first before I actually banned them for everyone. Then but now I've gone to a more liberal stance where they're allowed for everyone. And meanwhile, before they were banned for minors, and now they're banned for they basically for minors they can each. I'm saying you can just choose whatever policy you want for each thing. So some things can be allowed, some things can be banned. Um, and that more or less corresponds to like a modern sort of libertarian position on those issues. But not. I mean, so basically, um, let's see. I kind of uh I kind of changed the sort of nudity. Well, not nudity. Well, I actually got rid of a specific paragraph on nudity and sex. So instead, I said that people are just free to roam and behave as they please within the public premises of the U.S., including displaying nudity and potentially sexual acts. So that is in one. That's a new sort of article. That's a new article I've created, and then for the other sex stuff, I put it in activities are pleasurable yet often harmful. So I've just added that consensual, like those are basically so that it's allowed for adults and may be allowed or banned for minors. It's allowed for majors and may be allowed or banned for minors, and that includes paid sexual acts in sexual films and acts with other species. So that covers that, but there's no specific thing on sex, and I don't think there should be a specific thing on sex, right? It's like, it's like the jerks that make, the quote conservatives that make big deal out of sex stuff, and I don't want to make a big deal out of sex stuff, but it should be allowed. But like it should be allowed, just like I don't know, like eating grapes should be allowed. Well, that's you could like again, it shouldn't require a whole big like a whole article dedicated to the fact that eating grapes is allowed. Um, so before I said there's a single language to be the official language, the sole official language of the universal state, and now I'm just saying that you have to reduce the number of languages as much as possible. And so oh no, I'm not. Oh, hi, stretchy. No, I'm not. I'm just because I didn't put on the speech chat, so I'm not reading what you're saying. I'm sorry. But this is better like this. I don't wanna. I don't really wanna get too involved. I've probably gone now, anyways. Um, um. So let's see. So yeah, instead I'm just saying that you have to standardize language as much as possible, but obviously if you have different species that don't have the same like praxicabilities, the same ability to just speak, then you can't really have them all have the same language. But what I said is that you should modify species to have them um, have the same language abilities ideally. Um, so then, I still have standardized government when schooling, free and mandatory, and I've just changed it again that there's a bit more of a range instead of a specific like age. Um, then I still have this thing of genetic engineering. Oh wait, so no, I added that I added an article that says we protect the environment. I added an article that we care about the well-being of conscious, what I'm calling bears, which is well the animals that are not Anders, so like what most people would just call animals. Um, and then so I've kept the genetic engineering, but I've got rid of the requirement that there be hermaphroditism. So, because I think like lots of people are attached to DIOEC. Okay, so you're still there. You want to go? What do you mean? Ask me a question. What are you talking about, Stretchy? Wait, so since you're still here, I'll put on the speech chat. But I'm pretty much soon done, and it's time for me to eat. And I wasn't really intending on streaming for very long. Um, can I buy your crazy ass a ticket so that you can live in my basement? Yeah. Sure. I would love to live in your basement. If you also like cook food for me and like wash my clothes and everything. Um, if you do that, I will gladly, gladly. Where do you live? Where do you live? You're in the United States, I imagine.
I live in Wisconsin.
Oh no, that's cold. That's too cold. Well, if you've got heating in your basement, then that's okay. Um, well, okay. I've never been to Wisconsin. I could go there sometime. Um, anyway, what was I saying? Um,
It's warm in my basement.
okay, well, that's nice. That's nice. Um, what was I? Let me just finish this. Okay, so because we're soon done. So I've added. So yeah, so I've actually removed because I know that lots of people are attached to this sort of idea of having males and females, and even myself, I'm actually attached, emotionally attached to that. So, and I feel it's not completely necessary. What you have to realize is that keeping separate sexes is basically a kink at that point. So we're basically basing our policy on a sexual kink. But I mean, fundamentally, that
It sounds more
is,
creepy than it actually is, haha.
yeah, yeah, it does sound a bit creepy. I was definitely thinking that. Um, or I thought, or unless you're talking about my thing, but yeah. Um, then I've added that two other things, um, which is that the United States defendants has to create defenses against attack from other states, and that it explains that the states um, basically tries to incorporate any weaker states of other species that it encounters, and if by force if necessary, and if it encounters states that are equally strong or stronger, then it strives to achieve peace with it. And potentially, if another state has a very similar constitution to it, uh, basically the same for all practical purposes, then it can allow itself to be incorporated by it. Um, right, because we don't want to create like needless
Where
conflicts.
do you live right now?
Right now, I live in the Auckland area of northern North Island of New Zealand. Um, and then another thing I added was that you're not allowed to terraform um, any already inhabited planet such that it becomes less inhabitable for the original native species, native Ander species, um, unless there is a population open to all majors of the original species born on and currently residing on the planet, and a majority of votes assent to such terraforming. Basically, what you want to avoid is having these issues of immigrants that then just
Do
completely
you
take
want to
over a
become
planet.
an American?
I am an American. Can't you hear that? Um, yeah, so it's just saying that we don't. we want to avoid the situation of species being taken over by other species and then them being able to like vote the original species out because that could create big conflict. Um, so then rules specific to the incipient universal state. And so this is when it's not yet complete, when not all countries of Earth belong to the universal state yet. Um, so I added a first article that says that while the universal state does not consider any other state legitimate and nonetheless continues to interact and collaborate with foreign states, does not form alliances or engage in disputes with foreign states. Um, but again, this is just generally. Um, wait, I actually have to add this. Disputes with foreign states unless
If I pay for your ticket to come to America, do you promise to vote Republican?
no, definitely not. The U.S. does not form alliances or engage in disputes with foreign states unless how do I have to change this? Uh, how do I add it? The U.S. wishes other states to merge with it, but generally does not try to overtake them or actively incite them to merge. It only does so if the totality of unincorporated states is much weaker than the U.S. and if success can almost be guaranteed. U.S. meaning universal state, not United States. Um,
So you would vote for a Democrat that uses tax-paying money to kill babies?
well, I feel that overall people's welfare is increased by the Democrats compared to the Republicans, although the Democrats still do a shitty job. So all in all, I'll vote for Democrats, even though I'm not thrilled by them. But I'm really not thrilled with Republicans. So, um, I mean, you see, and I've got a pretty strict stance on abortion. Um, I'm not all very, I'm not very liberal about abortion. But still, uh, like the Democrats would care more about kids later on in life. I mean, once they're born, the Democrats care a lot more about kids than Republicans. Um,
Killing babies is fine as long as they use their own money to kill their own baby.
okay, that is really weird. That is weird. No, like no, no. Um, because I have to add, as long as the totality of
That is a weird thing. I
unincorporated
agree.
states. Yeah. Okay. So you agree that that's weird. Okay. As long as the totality of unincorporated states is uh not much weaker than the I don't know. Okay, I used to say as the U.S. does not form alliances or engage in dispute with foreign states. Um, but I'm getting rid of that. I'm getting rid of that. Um, okay, I'm getting rid of that. So I'm just changing this February 16. Okay. So yeah. So what I'm saying is basically you
When
try
a
not to.
woman kills their own baby, they become a pawn of Satan.
Well, like I said, if it's under a certain age or if her health is really in danger, then of course it should be allowed. Uh, anyway, so what I'm saying is that basically the U.S. tries to not be belligerent, but will be belligerent if it has to. The U.S. builds shelters from for like attack and stuff. It retains the military. It generally tries to uh, get agreements with other states to downsize their military. But if other states increase the military, then the U.S. also increases its military. Um, and then then I had this thing about different tier zones. Oh, what's this? Oh, you subscribed. Really? Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, dude. You're my. Are you sure? Did you actually intend to subscribe? Was that not a mistake?
Fuck you.
Wait,
I
what?
love you.
Wait, what? Well, thanks. Thanks. I appreciate it. You're my second subscriber ever. Second subscriber ever. Um, heck, I'll make you wait. So, here we go.
Really?
Yeah. Uh, how do I do this? Okay, here we go. Here we go. Oh, really? You already won? Wait. Oh, yeah. Okay. Great. 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 Uh, okay. Let's do this.
You're such a piece of shit, you remind me of myself.
Piece is not like that. That piece is like piece like that. Piece is P-I-E, like a pie, but you say piece. Um. Anyway, sorry, I'm being a grammar Nazi.
Haha.
Um. Well, that's funny. I'm not sure if that's a backhanded compliment or a backhanded criticism, but maybe. Thanks. um. Anyway, uh. Well, I'll come and say hi if I ever am in Wisconsin. Um, and funnily enough, you're also like I've got sort of two like sort of conservative-ish types as my subscribers apparently,
I'm
which is,
here
which
to
is
have
funny.
fun.
Which is funny. My other subscriber is who's already been subscribing for a few months is I don't know who it used to be called Charles Five Lesage, a French guy, and now it changed to Yves Boutillier. I don't know if you remember. So yeah, that's my other subscriber. Um, so I had these income tier zones, and so I just sort of fleshed that out. I'm not really sure if there's much really to add. I mean, I don't really feel like explaining exactly how this income tier zone system works, but basically the idea is to um, is to avoid having a bunch of people immigrate to a richer part of the universal state, to an ex-independent country that is a lot richer, because people really are kind of not keen about having lots of immigrants come in. So this is how you avoid having lots of immigrants come in, even if they're basically restrict migration within the universal state for a while until basically the economic levels have equalized. What I'm saying is that to help and like before, I also said that you provided the same basic income to everyone, I think, whereas now I basically made it clear that you can have different basic income. You can have like tax revenue
You bombast
from
fucking
only.
freak. Don't explain anything to me. This existence is a joke.
Well, I'm not really explaining it to you. This is to document. Like this is just to sort of have this as I'm putting on YouTube, and this is sort of a video so that people can watch it. Then in hindsight. Um. So yeah. So what I'm saying is that like we're not going to give all the money from the rich stuff and redistribute all the money from the richer parts of the world back to the poorer parts. Instead, we're just going to keep the rich places as rich as they are now, and then any growth that comes from the rich will get from the rich places like what's now the United States, or like Europe now. Um, any growth that they create will then get given to the poorest parts of the universal states, like in Africa. Um, until levels of wealth are equalized between all parts of the world and then of Earth, and then we can get rid of borders and we just merge everything. Um, let's see. And then there was the sort of rules on citizenship and what it takes to become a citizen if you're immigrating and all that kind of stuff. And so I just fleshed that out. It's not really, basically that's just pragmatic stuff. So it's not really all that interesting because it's not really about fundamental stuff. So I mean, that can just people can just once I have a website and I post the different iterations of the Constitution, then they can just compare for themselves. Finally, I've just added before that corporations also can. So I already had the fact that corporations from other states can be in the U.S. But now I'm saying that like I've added that they can be uh, taxed or because before I said they can be given
White
preferential tax rights.
Republicans will be treated like the Jews in Nazi Germany.
Um, no, they won't be treated like that. If you keep saying Republicans shit, you go to prison, as I already said. You don't. There's no death penalty, so there's nothing like that. And there's no like punishment based on what you used to be before you were part of the universal state. So if you keep on like doing Republican activism, then that gets considered sedition and treason. So you just get put in, first you get fined, then you get put in jail. But like you don't like get anything worse than that. And I've said that jail has to be offer decent conditions, so it have to be it has to be decent. Um, so then I've also just added that imports and exports may be taxed or forbidden in wholesale dependent on the state. So I just added that. And finally, I said that some expression of wrong beliefs may remain allowed as required to limit popular discontent. So just to not maybe some people, especially like I'm thinking like people like in particular Muslims who are like used to like being really Muslim and their whole life revolves around that, like maybe not immediately forbid, like not immediately close all mosques and forbid all people from wearing veils right away because that could be maybe too much of a shock. So instead, you can say do it gradually. And then I also said government possession of weaponry capacity sufficient to oppress the whole population may remain allowed as long as a large portion of the population remains opposed to the universal state and poses a threat to its existence. So the idea is that I want to have a sort of citizen militia thing, but for that to work, first the vast majority of the
Hey
population
shithead,
has to
can you
support
play music?
no, I cannot, because like I explained at the beginning of the stream when you weren't there, my previous time I showed the amendment to the universal state. I played music. It might have been even on your behest and at your behest, and basically I got my video banned because it played copyrighted music. So no. Um, and so yeah. So the point is that what we need is to have first uh, everybody sort of on board with the universal state, and then yes, you'll have a citizen militia
Fuck the system.
where everybody is a sort of everybody is its own is part of the basically is part of the armed forces. Every citizen is a member of the armed forces of the universal state, but for that first to be viable, you have to have the vast majority of citizens actually support the universal state. And as long as that's not the case, well, we can presume that the government will initially be made up of people who did support the universal state, right? It'll be like the universal state, activists, revolutionaries, and as long as there's lots of opposition to the universal state, they can have the military capacity uh, you know, to quelch any dissent.
Do you know
Um,
that I'm in a position to take control?
is that so? Um, great. Um, so I'm actually done now, so I'm basically so anybody who's watching this in the future can just stop at this point because I'm done explaining the modifications. If you want to say any last thing stretchy, I will just I will answer, but otherwise I'm just gonna stop streaming at this point. Anyway,
I live in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
okay. Um, that is nice. Uh, Is will that be your sort of final thing to say?
Sorry.
Why sorry? What are you sorry about? Uh, oh yeah. Sorry, I'm just doing. Okay, are you? Just tell me if you're going.
Because I feel like I am a failure.
You feel like you're a failure? No. Why do you feel like you're a failure? What makes you feel like you're a failure? Sometimes I gotta admit I have a hard time understanding what you're saying. Like I
I should be able to organize a group.
okay. Well, do you want to organize a group? I'm probably going to be going in the United States pretty soon, so like if you actually want to meet up, I
I
mean
want to.
I'd be willing about that. I'm probably not too keen on you creating a group because that's just going to be some sort of weird shit pursuit. So I'm sort of lukewarm about the group thing. You're welcome to join my group once I get my thing going. I'm gonna be like I've said. I'm gonna be very soon. Gotten my whole passport things renewed. I'm gonna be leaving New Zealand. I've been so like I don't know if you know my situation, right? I've lived most of my life in Europe. Now I've got some family in New Zealand. My parents have moved to New Zealand for retirement. I'm just staying with them for now, for this year, basically since a bit more than a year
You're
now.
okay. God put me where I need to be.
Okay. And now I'm going to be going back to towards Europe and stuff. I might be going by the United States, and so that is that's sort of my plan. I'll probably be going really pretty soon, like within a month or something. So yeah, that is that is that. All right, so it's actually time for me to eat.
Come
So
to Wisconsin.
okay, well thanks. Yeah, so I might be going by the United States, and so yeah, I might as well if I could do a little tour and stuff. That'd be cool. All right. Well, thanks for coming by. Thanks for coming by. I'll probably see you soon. Thanks for subscribing again. Notice that I made you mod. That's my little gift to people who subscribe. So
We will
you
stay
can
in touch.
just enjoy that. And yeah, see you around. Bye.